want to mention, and this will come full circle, is that I just recently came back from Portland. And the reasoning why I went down to Portland is because Minneapolis is the heart of this movement, is the heart of the George Floyd movement. And because that we've been aligning with Portland, it was important to me to go to the heart of Oregon's movement and see what exactly they're doing. And something that really struck me, and I always think about this, is that we never fully, I feel like we never fully capture a concept until someone asks us a question that's like, whoa, what do you mean by that? And you have to think about it. And something that happened while we were moving a dumpster to make a barricade is this girl, she was white, she was moving this dumpster, and I was like, let me help you. And she's like, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Minneapolis. And she goes, you know, it's really too bad that things are slowing down in Minneapolis. You guys haven't really been up to anything. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, because we're not burning shit down? Because we're not, you know, having, you know, these night marches and we're doing stuff during the day. And I just thought that was interesting. So I said, she said, well, what have you guys been up to? And I was like, well, we've been doing a lot of community outreach. We've been doing a lot of political reform. We're working with like families. She rolls her eyes so hard and walks away from me. She was like, political? And I just thought that was so odd. And so anyway, the thing that made me feel was the fact that I find a lot of pride in being in Minneapolis. I really do believe that we have a lot of heart and soul. And not only that, but the people that have, like all of you, who consistently show up to every single march for the last almost 3 months with boots on the ground. We are the ones that see the small organizations that fill the gaps that the city has created. So we have, I have a lot of things in here, I'm so sorry. Anyway, I'm gonna read this. So I wrote down that the reasoning why that my boots are still on the ground is because I know that this is the only way you can hear what the community really needs. It is hard for people in the suburbs to conceptualize what defunding the police could look like and what other resources could be placed in replacement of these funds. But for us, people with boots on the ground, it's easy because we see community leaders and community efforts pay out of their own pocket and try to survive and maintain their ability to provide for this community through community funds. Our community has been able to pick up the pieces. Resources getting burned down and stores closing up for local families. There's been different organizations that pop up, like Twin Cities Stands Together, which is now the Twin Cities Relief Initiative. And many others showing up at 38th in Chicago, aka Floyd, and many other locations. People are claiming that homeless folks caught wind of the resources offered by the community from this movement and moved into the city, blaming our movement for the influx. And what I want to say to them is thank you. What a compliment. It shows to us that our community, the same community, has been providing safe locations around the cities for homeless encampments, as well as safe zones for women who are endangered. However, currently in Minneapolis, the city has been moving camps from gentrified areas in the south to corners of downtown and north. And there's also a long waiting list for housing, as I think his name was
Terry.
As Terry mentioned. And yet there are many abandoned homes all across Minneapolis. And then there's also a point, which I actually am proud of, is that the NAACP recognized that with this uprising, that the police was going to create even more gaps between the community and them in response. They called for local citizens from our affected neighborhoods with their conceal and carries to provide community patrolling to fill these gaps, which is what essentially created the Minnesota Freedom Fighters. They were born from the community for the community. And now that community patrolling has been city approved and acknowledged, that also provided a space for community members to fill. And they're also running off of community donations as well. The way that I see this is that because we in the community care about our community, we recognize those gaps. And from our pocket, from our time, We have been the ones that have been filling them. And so for me, what I see is that we are leading the example. We are the standard of what the city should be doing. I work with so many organizations and I see them, and there's always a point where they say, we're broke. We don't have any more funds. And so we start doing fundraising. It's like so difficult to get money for the families that have been affected. It's so difficult to get money for resources, for food, for all those things. Because there's a certain point where people stop looking at us. You start thinking that we're just out here. But the truth is that there still aren't any resources available in Southside for food and groceries and supplies, and we still have to keep that up.
Tell that. Right.
So moving forward, like I said, if the people who make this city can be the backbone of support, the city, in utilizing its financial resources, aka our tax dollars, should start to catch up to our standards of ourselves. If the city stands behind Black and brown bodies in homelessness, they should be aligning with the community and providing these resources, or even maybe creating job opportunities to help support folks who have either been paying out of pocket or spending their hours dedicated to helping this community. And this is a little joke, but these are different things that I've been noticing for places that we, different communities have been recommending that we can start investing towards, well, specifically the city. And as you guys know, George Floyd Square, aka Floyd Town, aka 38th in Chicago, Floyd, etc. They have been getting threats from the city that they're going to remove it and start reopening that area. And they said that they wrote up a list of demands, and they said until you meet these demands, we're not going to negotiate moving these barricades. And which they so I reviewed some of them, and here's 3 that they recommended. And one of them is investing $400,000 into George Floyd Square zone through the neighborhood associations to create new jobs for young people, which will help deter violence. Investing $300,000 into the George Floyd Square zone through the neighborhood associations to provide undoing racism training for the Black community provided by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And then also investing in Justice Frontline Aid, or the 612 MASH, aka the Med Tent. For first aid, especially in preparation of the winter months. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'll get on some cross-country skis for this. Let's keep going. Regarding the homelessness and supply crisis, there's just some options here too. And there's outreach programs that are building shelters off of Franklin that the city could be investing in. Minneapolis Sanctuary, which provides food for the homeless population. Mental health crisis resources to help elevate a different life path and different options for them. Creating housing options with the abandoned homes or other resources, like investing in contracts with local hurting hotel businesses that could provide homelessness solutions in Minneapolis as well. For other social needs, another few options is investing in community patrol, investing in community outreach programs, providing more resources for the community, and investing in corresponding programs, which essentially would replace the police in regards to wellness checks. Because I'm sure you guys have probably seen me, you guys have probably followed Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence. But during the Mother's March, where we brought, we want to say 150, but ended up being 120 families that came out, a lot of their stories lined up with wellness checks going wrong. And so, we've seen that also locally with Travis Jordan. I can't think of any names right now, so I'm tired, I'm sorry, but you get it. And what I want to end this with is something that was so beautiful that I received from Portland. I went to Portland, I was a little disappointed. I felt like they didn't maintain a platform for Black and brown bodies, which is something that I'm so proud of in Minneapolis that we have continued to do. And while I was in Portland and I was trying to navigate the situation, figure out what groups I wanted to follow, I ended up going in front of their Justice Center, and I had the blessing of meeting Gary Floyd. And Gary Floyd is the second cousin of George Floyd. He's one of the few family members in his family that's actively out there protesting, because a lot of them are focused on the lawsuit, etc. And after this protest that gone wrong, the police pushed us out, they separated us, and I ended up finding Gary, and we sat down at this picnic table, and I recorded him, and I asked him, I said, Gary, if you have a message for Minneapolis, what would it be? And here's some of what he said to me. He said, they're just waiting for us to stop. Don't stop. Have direction. Understand that this movement started with George Floyd being brutally murdered right there in your backyard. If there is any representation for the Floyd family, or any voice on behalf of the Floyd family, you guys have that voice. You're there. You're there. If there is any place on this planet that cannot lose hope, it's there. It's you guys. It's right in your backyard. So please, please don't give up. For the Floyd family, George, Breonna, Tamir, Trayvon, you are their voice. You have to be heard. Say it loud. And then I asked him, Gary, how does this differentiate from what you would say to Portland? And he says, this is a small snippet. He goes, Portland has to learn from you guys on how to do it. Bring the focus back to Minneapolis. Starting in Minneapolis, it is really about a black man's life being lost. It is really about defunding the police. It really is about representing the families who have lost a loved one from police brutality. He said, Minneapolis is the front line. And I want for you guys to think about that, because I bet you right now, if I was like, let's hold a moment of silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, you guys would be dead ass silent. You'd be so respectful in that regard. When Gary tries to do that in Portland, in Seattle, in LA, in every single city he has gone to represent his cousin, no one can even stand doing it for more than a minute. More than a minute. It makes them that uncomfortable. But because George Floyd died in our backyard, and we understand that that man's life is priceless, we're able to do that. And so I want for you guys to think about that. I want for you to refuel this movement and think about the fact that there's people in Portland that think what we're doing is wrong because we're now focusing on political reform. Sorry.
Police reform.
Yeah, on police reform. We even have an active bill that's out there, package, I don't know what it's called, but I'm not good at political talk. But we have an active package that's out there that got stuck in Senate. And it was about police reform. It was about creating a co-responding system. It was about funding these families. Because I don't know if you guys know about this, and I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent. But something that happens with these families is that if a regular civilian kills your loved one based off of firearms, they actually have a legal program. I think it's through the state, maybe it's national, I don't know how it works. But they will actually provide money or funding for that family on a monthly basis. If you have a child, that's an extra $300 a month. And so something that is so bothersome is that for these families who have been killed or who have survived police violence, they don't receive anything because they can't apply for it. Because if they apply for it and that program accepts them, they're admitting fault at the police. It is an assumption that if your loved one was killed by the police, that they were in the wrong and it was justified. And that is where our money should be going. That's where the city's money should be going, is providing support. I don't care what the fuck they did. Support these families. Let them apply to have this support. Because fucking Kanye West, for example, I think he donated $7 million to something in Minneapolis. Something, and was like, oh, this is gonna go towards the families. I work with the families. We didn't see shit. So I'm not going to hold these organizations accountable, but I'm going to hold our city accountable for not providing this support and for people on the ground for seeing these gaps. Because I don't see anyone who's actually able to make that change being able to allocate the resources and understand where this needs to actually go. That is the biggest reason why I'm here. It's because I've been protesting for 5 years. In every single large movement I've ever seen, there's always been corruption in regards to funding. It always goes to these big name organizations, these people from the suburbs that think that, or celebrities, think they're doing the right thing, donating to the bigger GoFundMes, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't help the communities. People get stuck in jail. People freeze to death. Like, this is the issue. And so that's why I know when you have your boots on the ground, you can look around and you can hear the voices of the community. You can find out what small organizations are actually making an impact. So that's something that I want for you guys to ask yourselves. And I think Toussaint mentioned there's like something where you can write something down for like the People's Charter. Think about that. You guys have been here. Even if this is your first protest, you probably live here. So use your voice and, just think about it. Think about the people that have helped you in this community and dig a little bit deeper. Twin Cities Relief Fund, or Initiative, they always provide food. But little do you know, they always are struggling because they have to get the community funds. And then there's a certain point where they start digging out of their own pocket. They're not getting paid for that. They don't make any money on that. A lot of them still have 9-to-5 jobs, same as any of these other organizations. No one's making money. Not the ones that I know that are actually making change. So let's start thinking about that. Think about the people that you respect, that you feel like are supporting this community, because that's how we're going to defund this police and hopefully at some point abolish them as well.
Right.
And the last thing I want to say is, again, like I said, it's hard for us to fully conceptualize what it is that we think until someone asks that question. So 2 things. First off, I remember someone asking me that. They said, how is the work that you're doing, how is the work of you, always going to these marches, going to these chants, going to these rallies, how is that helping, how does that align with your views of what you ultimately want to change with this police reform? And that's what I told them. I said, well, I go there and I see all these little communities and I see how powerful the people are when we give a fuck. When we see the gaps, when we see starving families, when we see black families from the cities have to spill into the suburbs and deal with racism when they're just trying to buy diapers for their fucking children. You see stacks of those diapers. At the beginning of this movement in front of Speedway, you saw just like a huge tower of them. And that was from the community. That's how we do it. We're bringing awareness. The second thing that comes with that, of asking this question, I had that realization in Portland. I started thinking to myself, what are we really here for? There's no one on this fucking planet that can ever define what your existence is here for. That is for you to decide. Same thing as why your boots are on the ground. That is for you to decide. For me, after asking myself that question, I started thinking about it, and I truly believe that it is important for us to continue to ask the question, do Black lives matter to you? Because I work in the whitest fucking place. Okay, I'm an engineer, I'm the only female engineer, and I'm also the only woman of color. And it sucks. Let me tell you what, they're all pretty old. I hope this doesn't go live, and I hope the phone's so soon. But I do like them. But the environment always reminds me of the difference between us. Today, my coworker asked me, he said, I'm so sorry, Anthea. He's like, he has a black son. He has a really hard time calling him black, so he feels bad about it. He always says, my African-American son. He asked me about how to do his son's hair, where to go get it. Like, he asked me all these questions. He's just so clueless, and he just wants to be better. And he asked me this question, he goes, Anthea, I just can't figure this out. Like, you guys want to defund the police, but what is your substitute? Where is that gonna go? Who's gonna replace those calls? What is this system? You know, like he's like, what are you fighting for? How can I understand how this can be real? And that is the question, because I was so afraid to be like, hey guys, I got arrested. Everyone's like, what the fuck? I was like, yeah, I got arrested, I'm sorry. But because of that, everyone knows that in my office. So they're like, okay, Anthea, you know, she's kind of slacking, but she's out there. She's doing this like Black Lives Matter thing. Like, she lives in the city, she lives in South Minneapolis. Like, let's ask her these questions. And our existence, our daily demonstration is to show that we are protesting against the police's non-effort or lack of effort to align with Black and brown bodies, to show that they give a fuck. So just think about that. Again, my existence here, I don't even know if I even said it, I'm like dying today. But my existence today and every single day is just to ask those questions, because a lot of those white folks that I work with in the suburbs, they go to church on Sundays, they have mostly white folks, they usually, you know, they don't deal with that. They don't have people challenging them that. So if we just ask that question, even if they say no, I just want to ask that question, because I bet you a lot of people aren't. So think about those questions. Question yourself about what exactly it is that you're here for. What exactly are you proud of the city for? And I bet you that'll help you figure out what avenues we can start working on for defunding the police and reallocating those resources to something else. Thank you so much.